Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is It's Just a Cookie. My name is Emily Marshall. We are going to get started very soon. So give us a hi or hello in the comments. Let us know where you are tuning in from. Today's topic is gentle nutrition. So I'm going to be talking about how to incorporate nutritious foods that help you heal your relationship with food and not restrict any foods or feel like you're dieting. So that is our topic today. And the question that I have for you is really, what questions do you have for me about nutrition or supporting your health in a non-restrictive way? So let me know, pop your questions into the comments. What questions do you have for me around nutrition or supporting your health in a non-restrictive way? We're going to get started very soon. Thank you all so much for tuning in. All right, here comes the countdown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to It's Just a Cookie. My name is Emily Marshall, and I'm an anti-diet registered dietitian. Now, this show is all about reframing your mindset on food, health, and your body. That's why it's called It's Just a Cookie. And if you're tuning in for the first time, what I do is I help people improve their relationship with food, break the diet cycle, and find peace with their body. Now, if you have been on numerous diets in your lifetime or weight loss attempts, you may have noticed a change in your relationship with food. Maybe you're experiencing a lot of guilt or anxiety or stress or shame around your body or the foods that you eat. This is all about healing from that mindset so that you can approach health in a sustainable, flexible, and inclusive way. Now, before I get started, we have our usual disclaimer, which is this show is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice. Now, today's topic is gentle nutrition, and I'll talk about why we use the term gentle, but really it's the 10th principle of intuitive eating, which is the approach that I use to help people improve their relationship with food. So my question for you all really is, what questions do you have for me regarding nutrition or supporting your health in a non-restrictive way? That's really what intuitive eating is about. It's about, honoring your health, honoring a sustainable way of eating that it does not involve dieting, that does not involve restriction. And it's also a non-weight focused approach, meaning we don't use weight as an indicator of health. We use a ton of other factors that indicate a person's health status, whether that's the internal blood work of cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, things like that. And it's also just based off of how you feel too. So your energy level, your mood, your digestion, things like that. Those are the indicators that we use to understand whether or not this is helping you to feel better. So again, let me know what questions you have. I also want to let everyone know that this is actually going to be my last show here on BetheChange. And if you have been tuning into my episodes for a while now, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. It has been just a wonderful experience to be on Anthony's page promoting what I do, but just wanted to let you know that this will be my last episode. But you can, of course, still tune in to me if you want to follow me on YouTube or if you want to follow me on Instagram. I will include those links. So before I get to your questions, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what is intuitive eating, right? And how does this concept of gentle nutrition, how does that sort of, in context of what I've been talking about on this show, healing your relationship with food, how does this all sort of fit in? So let me share my screen with you all so I can share with you an article that I wrote about intuitive eating. Okay, here we go. So what does intuitive eating entail, right? It entails basically 10 principles. And these are the 10 principles. So the first one is reject the diet mentality. Learn how to let go of thoughts, tools, rules that are keeping you trapped in the cycle of dieting. Second principle, honor your hunger. So become aware of the signs of hunger that your body gives. Learn to listen and trust those signals instead of trying to ignore or dispute those signals. Third principle is make peace with food. Understand that food is neither good nor bad and should not have moralistic values in the first place. So depriving yourself of the foods you love or that you label as bad or off limits only sets you up for intense desire and guilt for eating that food, as well as potentially binge eating those foods. Fourth principle is to challenge the food police. So all those negative or shameful thoughts that you have around food, we can learn to challenge those thoughts and have a more rational way of thinking about food. And so that is principle number 4. Principle number 5 is discover the satisfaction factor. So food should be enjoyed, right? Why do we have taste buds? So we want to think about what makes us feel satisfied when we eat. And this can actually help us with principle number 6, which is feel your fullness. So leaving a meal or snack feeling comfortably full or satisfied, this can be done through, thinking about all the other principles of intuitive eating. Principle 7 is cope with your emotions with kindness. So many people use food to cope with their emotions. It's known as emotional eating. This is a normal thing that many people do, but when it becomes unhealthy is when it's your sole coping mechanism. So if you are always turning to food to help deal or manage your emotions, you can learn new and different ways to cope with your emotions. That is principle 7. Principle 8 is respect your body. So actually, if you watched last week's episode, we talked about body image and what having a healthy body image means. So that is what principle 8 is about. Principle 9 is exercise, feel the difference. So exercise should never be used as a punishment. A lot of times if you're in that dieting mindset, you are using exercise as a means to control your body size, to burn calories or to be used as a punishment for what you ate or didn't eat. And when you have this relationship with exercise, it can really set up a negative pattern for yourself in which exercise actually is not enjoyed. It's just you're forcing yourself to do it. So by reframing your mindset around exercise, you can have a much healthier, sustainable relationship with exercise. And then, of course, the last principle is gentle nutrition, which is to honor your health with gentle nutrition. So using nutrition guidelines, and not having a restrictive-based mindset or a fear-based mindset, but rather an addition-based mindset, meaning what can you add to your diet to help support your health versus what can you take away in your diet to support your health. There's a little bit of a difference there, and we'll talk more about what that means today. So that is just an overview, how this concept fits into what we're talking about and what I help people with. I'll go through what some of the issues are around, not thinking about nutrition in a gentle way. But first, I want to get to your comments. So let me do that. So hi, Brenda. You're from California. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hi, Jackie. You're from Texas. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope Cash is okay. Yes, I hope Cash is okay too. We're watching from Pennsylvania. Hi from Tennessee. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, T. All right, so that's my comment. What questions do you guys have about nutrition or supporting your health in a non-restrictive way? So pop them into the comments. Let's see, we got Debbie. You are from North Carolina. Awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in. I love that we have people tuning in from all over. Stephanie, you are from Washington. You're 25 miles south of Seattle. That's awesome. I also live in Washington, so love it. Hi, Cheryl. You're from Ohio. Awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hi, Rose. You're here. Awesome. Love it. And lastly, we got Jackie's comment of working on cutting sodas. You feel like you're addicted to Coke. Okay, Jackie, thank you so much for sharing that comment. I know many people probably feel the same way as you. You feel like you feel the need or desire to constantly drink Coke, so it feels like an addiction, and you are trying to work on cutting out soda. So I want to talk a little bit about this this idea of being addicted to food, being addicted to certain foods. This is a controversial topic, no doubt. Like, a lot of people will try to debate this and say that yes, food is addictive, or that certain foods are addictive, like sugar or things like that. They can be addictive. But the thing is, in the research, we still haven't had any firm conclusions that point to food being addictive or certain foods being addictive. You know, there is an exception there with caffeine. Caffeine can be addictive because, for a couple of reasons, you can build up a tolerance to caffeine where you need more and more to feel the same effects of caffeine. And also you can feel withdrawal from not having caffeine if you have been drinking or having a source of caffeine for a while and you've built up that tolerance. But with food and, you know, with drinks like Coke or things like that, which may or may not have caffeine in it, depending on what you're drinking, and it may or may not have sugar in it, depending on what you're drinking. This is, I think, something that just hasn't quite been determined yet around whether or not this is addictive. And I'm going to show you now a picture around what might be happening for you, Jackie, and what does happen for many of my clients around various types of food. So here's what I kind of want to show you. So this picture here is known as the dieting pendulum. So on one side of the pendulum, we've got dieting or restriction, right? On this side of the pendulum, which is actually, it's always backwards. Okay, which is this side of the pendulum, right? You are trying to restrict. You're trying to cut out foods. You're trying to limit foods. And what this does for many people is it starts to build up this feeling of deprivation, this feeling of restriction from a psychological standpoint, but also from a biological standpoint, right? You are basically under eating. You are not giving your body the nutrients or the energy that it needs to function. And what this does is it forces the pendulum to swing to the opposite direction, where on the opposite side, you know, on this side of the pendulum, we've got overeating, binging. Some people might use the word indulging, right? And basically people get stuck in this pattern of swinging back and forth, right? Let me know in the comments if that has ever happened to you. So what I mean by this, right, why food itself can't be addictive is because we need food. We need food to survive, right? Nobody would ever say that you are addicted to water or that you're addicted to air, right? But if you have been deprived of those things, if you have been holding your breath for a long time, or if you have been dehydrated, what happens, right? Our body has a response that tries to counteract that restriction. So you'll take in a big, deep breath of air if you've been holding your breath for a while. Or if you have been dehydrated, you're going to be feeling super, super thirsty, or your body is going to be super thirsty. And it's going to turn up those signals to help you drink water and help you, increase your water intake. But your body also has a means of restricting your urine output, right? So it's going to try to hold on to hydration, water as much as possible. So that's why one of the reasons why food has not been shown to be addictive is because we need food to survive. I know this can be, super confusing or maybe frustrating to hear or understand, especially with something like Coke, because you might think, well, we don't need Coke. We don't need Coke to survive. And there might be certain things in Coke which make it, really rewarding or pleasurable to consume. But, think about that. Think if this is happening for you, not only with Coke, but with potentially other foods. And that's why we're talking about this topic today. How can we incorporate nutrition in a gentle way versus a restrictive way? Because when you do that, you're actually able to find that happy medium spot in the middle where you don't have such drastic swinging back and forth between the two extremes, right? When people talk about everything in moderation, this is sort of the concept that can help you find that balance or moderation. And I think most people can get behind that idea. They can get behind the idea that, no food is going to be bad for you. But it's really the extreme behaviors is when we start to see an effect on a person's mental as well as physical health. So I really like this diagram a lot, where it kind of helps people see that healthy middle ground. And that is what intuitive eating can help you do. It can also help you stop this cycle. So I talk about how I help people break the diet cycle. This is also what the diet cycle is basically about, right? So it's also known as the diet binge cycle, where a person starts a diet, right? And we know that really all diets, no matter what type of diet it is, whether it's like Weight Watchers or keto, it involves some type of restriction. Usually, the overarching theme is that it's a calorie restriction, but some diets are more restrictive than others, right? They restrict entire food groups, or, they just restrict your calories. But that's kind of how this cycle starts, is it starts with that restriction pattern. And it starts with people starting the diet until eventually at some point they hit a point where they're no longer able to follow the diet because it's too restrictive and they're falling into this pattern, or, they fall into emotional eating or binge eating, something like that. And, this typically results in a lot of feelings of guilt or shame. And the cycle repeats itself, right? You repeat that cycle of going on diet after diet after diet. Could be the same diet, could be different diets throughout your life cycle. But this is, what I help people break, because we got to stop dieting. In order to break that cycle, we have to stop the restriction and start focusing on, how you feel, focus on your satisfaction, focus on what makes you feel good, and doing that in a sustainable way. So I hope that clears up some questions or concerns. Many people have heard of yo-yo dieting. This is another thing that sort of demonstrates that. And so a lot of people also think that if they just had more willpower, or if they just had more discipline, they would be able to follow this pattern, right? But that's actually not the case, because we really have a finite amount of willpower, a finite amount of discipline or control until at a certain point our biology takes over and we get stuck in this pattern, right? So there's really no amount of willpower or discipline that a person can have in order to, stay on the diet. And if they do, typically it indicates a eating disorder or disordered eating when you start to get into that highly restrictive pattern or mindset. I wanted to mention too, another issue that we have with diets and nutrition is we pretty much have a lack of culturally appropriate food choices. the idea of nutrition has been really Americanized, and that has sort of resulted in this really broad way of thinking about food that doesn't honor people's cultural heritage. And I've worked with a lot of people, and what I've most commonly seen is people feel some shame or guilt around eating their cultural foods, right? Because we have this sort of picture or image of what healthy food is and what it's not. And it can be very black and white thinking. And so, thinking about gentle nutrition is not black and white. It's not so simple. So that is another thing that I wanted to mention. When we think about gentle nutrition, we also want to think about how do we want to honor your culture and the foods that you grew up with or the foods that you enjoy. And you can eat those foods and still have a healthy and balanced diet. The other thing to realize too is gentle nutrition is not weight focused. So the goal is not weight loss. The goal is to have a healthier relationship with food, reduce binge eating, reduce restriction, reduce disordered eating behaviors, focus on more internal signals of health, whether that's cholesterol, blood sugar, blood pressure, mental health, right? All of that is the focus of this approach. So I'm going to go back to your comments, and then I'll get into, how do we start incorporating gentle nutrition? Okay, so let me go back. I think the last comment was this one. Hi, thanks for tuning in. You're from North Dakota. Awesome. Okay, have I done research in, I have not heard of that, Gemma Sylvestra for sugar addiction. It has worked great for you. Well, no, I honestly haven't heard of that, but that is really interesting. And I would be, interested in learning more about that. And it sounds like it's worked for you, so that is definitely good. The thing to remember about this is there's no one size fits all to health, right? Everyone is going to have a different approach that works best for them because everyone has a different DNA, everyone has a different lifestyle, right? So people's bodies are going to react differently to different things, and it's about finding what works for you. This is just one approach that I help people with, and there is a lot of research to support this particular approach, the intuitive eating and health at every size approach. Okay, so I'm going back to your comment, Jackie, give me 1 second. So you get migraines. Oh, I skipped this comment. So you say caffeine is the issue. Yeah, so you're trying to cut back on caffeine, you're trying to cut back on Coke, which may be your primary source of caffeine, and you're getting those migraines when you go cold turkey. So my advice would be don't go cold turkey, right? That's one of the things that makes caffeine addictive is we build up this tolerance and we get those withdrawal symptoms when we cut it off. So you have to cut it off slowly or switch to some other sources of caffeine that have lower amounts of caffeine, whether that's tea. That's the one that's coming to my mind, that has less caffeine. Coffee may or may not have less caffeine than Coke. I'm honestly not sure. But that would be, what I would say to help you reduce your chances of having migraines from cutting it off. And then Carissa, you said you went on a diet, was doing great. Then you chose a cheat day, 1 day a week, and it went to 2 days. Then it went to 7 days a week. Thank you, Carissa, for sharing your experience. You are not alone. So, right, this mindset of having a cheat day is very, very common among people who diet. And I think it comes from the idea that or you've come to realize that being 100% restrictive all the time, not possible, right? Just not possible. And you're probably not enjoying it really either. So the idea of a cheat day comes up where you're like, I can enjoy food for this 1 day, But the mindset of a cheat, right? We know that cheating is bad. We know that cheating is wrong. And so it does sort of instill that mindset that you are doing something wrong and that you are doing something bad. And that is not what we want to promote for a healthy relationship with food, right? What I teach my clients is that when you are feeding yourself, no matter what food it is, you are nourishing yourself. You are providing energy and nutrients for your body, no matter what you are eating. And we really have to remove that morality, that good versus bad mindset, in order to have a healthier relationship with food, right? So, a picture that I wanted to show, I'll have to pull it up in just a minute. Give me a second, but I'll move on here to, so, how do we incorporate gentle nutrition? And then actually, let me go back to the comments. I'm getting distracted. Okay, I'm seeing your comment here. So you switch to carbonated water like LaCroix, Polar, Bubbly, Pure V versus soda. Yes, so I have heard that this has worked for many people because, if you're trying to reduce the caffeine and you're switching to other sources of caffeine, you may actually miss that carbonation because it provides, some sort of interest for our palate, right? And so some people, they do well with switching to LaCroix, Bubbly, Pure V, stuff like that. But I would say too, if you really want to, if you really enjoy Coke or whatever sort of soda or pop, you can still have that in your diet and be able to moderate it and not feel so controlled or guilty of having that in your diet. Just like any other food, right? If you really enjoy cake or if you really enjoy chips, you should be able to enjoy those foods without feeling like you're going to binge on those foods or without feeling like, you have to restrict them in order to feel better about yourself, right? Because we got to remove, that morality from the food. Okay. So, when we're talking about gentle nutrition, we typically reserve it for the very end when we're working with clients. And when I say we, I mean most anti-diet registered dietitians. And we do this because you have to kind of work through changing your mindset around food, changing your mindset around health and your body in order to think about nutrition. Because a lot of times nutrition is wrapped up in that diet mindset, because a lot of nutrition recommendations tell you to limit, or they tell you to cut out or reduce. And it can really sort of reinforce that mindset that food is bad. So that's one of the reasons why gentle nutrition is last, because, it takes time, especially if you think about however long you've been dieting. If you have been dieting for years, right, it will take time for you to change or reframe that mindset around food and health. So some simple things that people can start off with that help to honor their health and also focus on nutrition is, the number one thing is to start eating enough, right? Because the diet mindset is all wrapped up in under eating. It's around that calorie restriction, which is not good for your metabolism. And it is not setting you up to actually nourish your body adequately, right? Because you're just under eating. So the first step to start thinking about gentle nutrition is really to start eating enough, enough to fuel your body, enough to give your body the energy and nutrients that it needs. So to do that, I tell people to follow the rule or guide of 3, which is to eat at least 3 meals, 3 snacks per day. And in those meals, and ideally those snacks, have at least all 3 macronutrients. When I say macronutrients, I mean protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So all 3 of those. And I know many people these days are trying to reduce or cut back on their carbohydrates. And a lot of this is due to fear of carbohydrates, right? So This is really a basic beginner step, is to not restrict or cut out foods, but rather to incorporate a good variety of foods and incorporate all three of those nutrients, because our body does need all three of those macronutrients in order to function optimally. And then the last part of the rule of three is to eat at least every 3 hours. So by following this pattern, this sort of structure of eating, one, it helps you eat enough throughout the day, so that you're actually getting enough calories to support your body. But it also helps you get in touch with how your body is feeling. Many people, if they have been dieting for a long time, they have actually lost touch with their hunger and fullness signals. So they're not able to pay attention or really understand those signals going on in your body. So by having this structure, being, more regular, consistent with your eating, you can actually start to feel your hunger and your fullness signals again, which is pretty cool. So another thing, I wanted to show you this picture really quick, around kind of what's the difference between a restrictive way of thinking about nutrition versus a inclusive or intuitive way of thinking about nutrition. So this is a post that I posted on my Instagram. And what it does is it shows you kind of side by side the difference between a rigid mindset and an intuitive mindset. So on that one side, right, which is this side, I'm going to try and point again. We've got the rigid mindset, which says, I must have carrots as a snack. I shouldn't have chips because chips are unhealthy. And what does this do, right? This mindset typically sets people up to binge or feel deprived, or just, have those cheat days where they're allowed to have chips, but that typically doesn't work long term. So when we're thinking about gentle nutrition, or we're thinking about intuitive eating, we can look at it from the other side, which is, I can have chips or carrots or both. I choose what I want, and my body tells me what feels right in the moment. So you're listening to your internal cues, and you honor health with gentle nutrition. And the key here, trying to point again, on this side of things, is it helps you learn to trust yourself with food. Oftentimes when people are on that rigid side, the rigid mindset, it's coming from a place of not being able to trust yourself around the chips, right? So you tell yourself you can't or you shouldn't have it. But once you're able to build up that trust, you are actually able to learn how to listen to your body better. And some days chips sound great, other days carrots sound better. And I know that can be really hard to think about or understand, when we're talking about this, or if you've been dieting for a while. But I promise you that is what happens when you practice intuitive eating. So again, if you are just tuning in, let us know if you have any questions about nutrition or supporting your health in a non-restrictive way. That is what we are talking about today. We are talking about gentle nutrition, which is the last principle of intuitive eating for helping you develop a healthy relationship with food and stop dieting for good. So I talked about the rule of three. That's really a basic way to start thinking about gentle nutrition, by eating enough and incorporating, all those food groups, and starting to let go of or challenge those rules or restrictive way of thinking about food. The next thing that you can do to help yourself with gentle nutrition or honoring your health is a little bit of meal planning. So depending on your experience with meal planning, right, some diets may have told you to meal prep or meal plan. And if you had a bad experience or a negative experience with that, you may not be so likely to want to return back to meal planning, and that is totally okay. But for some people, they may feel ready or they may desire to incorporate meal planning again. And that can actually be beneficial because it can help you, follow that first guide of eating consistently, because it takes time to prepare or think about what you're going to eat. And if you've planned ahead and you know what you're going to eat roughly, for the week, you've got the ingredients ready to prepare your food, or you've got enough snacks on hand to support your hunger. So meal planning, is another way to start incorporating gentle nutrition. And then, of course, listening to your hunger signals. So often I see people who are just afraid to eat when they're hungry, and they've been told for so long that they can't trust or they can't, listen to their bodies when they're hungry. So, our hunger is there for a reason. It is there to tell us that we need to eat something because we need the energy. So by listening to your hunger signals, this is another basic practice of gentle nutrition, because you need, in order to get the nutrition, you need to eat, right? It's very basic, very simple. Eat in order to get nutrition. But really, the basis of thinking about gentle nutrition is really, it's an act of self-care. It's a way of taking care of yourself, nourishing yourself, respecting your body, as opposed to self-control. So many diets are around trying to control or restrict yourself, right? And so we're trying to make this sort of switch or nudge towards caring for yourself. And that is really sort of the basis of thinking about gentle nutrition, is how can you take care of yourself in a loving, kind, compassionate way? Because so often, right, the diet mindset is wrapped up in perfectionism. And that, I think, is where a lot of people also get the idea of a cheat day, because they know perfectionism is just not possible 100% of the time. And so, but the idea of perfectionism is really rooted in rigid thinking or controlling thinking, right? And it's not about self-care, it's about self-control. So by switching to this self-care approach, you're actually able to be more self-compassionate, realizing that you are human and that you have, other priorities, other needs in life that sometimes come before or above, eating perfectly or eating, clean or nutritious 100% of the time, right? So that is I think, an important distinction to realize, what is the difference between gentle nutrition versus a dieting approach to nutrition. And while we're, thinking about this and we're trying to incorporate more variety, we're eating consistently, we're not limiting any foods, we can begin to relearn how to listen to our bodies. And by focusing on, how does the food affect our energy level? How does it affect our mood? How does all of this fit into, say, our strength or our stamina, when we're exercising or moving our body? How does it affect our digestion? How does it affect our ability to focus on what we want to focus on? And how does it affect our sense of satisfaction, right? Are we actually enjoying it, or do we not enjoy it? And when you have these sort of internal guides, internal feelings that dictate more so, what you're eating, it becomes a lot more sustainable in the long run, right? You're not relying on external rules like calories or your weight or the diet rules. Instead, you are the expert of your own body, because you are the only one able to notice how food makes you feel. And, by making the switch to you are the expert of your body, it becomes, so much more individualized, right? A diet is very prescriptive and generalized, but when you are focusing on your body, that is very highly individualized. And so, it's all about you and your needs. Excuse me. So I have a question here from Siggy. How do you tell the difference between hunger and just wanting to eat something? Love this question, Siggy. Thank you so much for asking this. So, excuse me, I'm having some like dry throat today. But a lot of people ask me this question. And so there are a lot of different signals that happen in your body that tell you you're hungry. And many people, when they think about hunger signals, a lot of people think about the feeling in their stomach, right? Maybe a lot of people associate rumbling stomach or growling stomach or an empty stomach. But what we got to realize is there's actually a ton of other signals that happen in our body which signal the need to eat. And one of those signals is actually thinking about food because, and this is actually a very subtle initial sign of hunger, is it starts sort of in the mind, in the brain, because our body is just so attuned to recognizing low blood sugar that it starts to put out these signals, which is pretty cool. And one of the signals is just starting to think about food. So you might think like, what sounds good for lunch? Or, what do I want to eat? Or what do I have? What do I have on hand that I can make myself for lunch? And so this is something to recognize, is that when you start to think about food, you may actually be hungry. And it isn't until you wait much longer that you start to feel more of these physical signs of hunger. And that can be happening in the stomach, but it can also happen like in the throat or the esophagus. It can also, and in more extreme cases, lead to headaches, migraines, a drop in your energy level, a drop in your mood, feeling hangry, right? And so what I teach people is to actually start to honor your hunger at the first sign. Because if you do that, you can avoid all of those harmful negative feelings of hunger where you do notice a drop in your energy, or you do notice a angry, irritable sense in your mood, or you feel discomfort in your body, right? We should not be feeling that way. We shouldn't be feeling that discomfort on a daily basis. So we can actually avoid that by eating something when we initially notice our hunger. And yes, it does take practice. It does take mindfulness to be able to do this. And I'm not expecting someone to be able to do it 100% of the time, because of course that would be wrapped up in perfectionism. We want to avoid that. Another thing to sort of go along with your question, Siggy, some people may be thinking about food because they are restricting it. So, you may have heard the concept of, if you tell yourself not to think about something, you actually think about it more, right? If someone says to you, don't think about white elephants, don't think about white elephants, what do? You think about white elephants when you are setting yourself up to think that way. And that is the same case with different foods. So if you say you have some ice cream in the house and you're like, I shouldn't have that ice cream. It's in the freezer. I really want it, but I shouldn't have it. Your thoughts about the ice cream just continue to increase and increase and increase until most people, or many people, may end up binging on that ice cream eventually, right? And so, part of making peace with food is actually allowing yourself to eat the food, feel satisfied by the food, and sort of try to challenge those negative or shameful thoughts of eating the food, right? If you're eating the ice cream and that is allowing yourself to eat the ice cream, but while you're eating the ice cream, you're telling yourself, oh, this is bad. I shouldn't have this. I'm going to need to make up for it later. I'm going to need to work out more the next day. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as unconditional permission to eat, which helps you make peace with that food. So I hope that sort of answers your question, Siggy, which was really, really a good question there. So Again, let me know if you have any other questions about this topic. A couple other things I wanted to mention to you was, down the line, once you've made peace with food and you've developed a healthier relationship with food, then you can start to think about various nutrition recommendations, whether that's trying to increase how many vegetables you have, or how much fish you're eating, or the whole grains that you're eating. Things like that. And some people might be able to look at food or nutrition labels and, feel okay in their relationship with food. And some people may not be able to look at those nutrition labels without feeling some sort of disordered thoughts about their relationship with food. And so it's okay. Not everyone has to look at nutrition labels. And this is how intuitive eating is really individualized to the person. So you can make decisions for yourself based on what works for you. Excuse me. My last thing that I wanted to mention about gentle nutrition is, we've talked a lot about food peace. And this is, I don't have a picture for it, but I think you guys can visualize it, is if you draw a symbol of a peace sign, right? We've got that divider in the middle. No, we've got a divider in the middle, but then two parts of it, right? So it's like the circle is divided into thirds. I know I just explained that horribly, but I think you guys get it. Hopefully, if you think about your plate as a peace sign, this can also help with gentle nutrition. So you divide your plate into thirds, just like a peace symbol. And that can also help you think about how to structure your meals, how to incorporate all food groups, and make sure that you're getting a variety of foods. And so what that would look like is you would have a portion of the plate for a protein food, a portion of the plate for potentially a vegetable, and a portion of the plate for carbohydrates. And then sometimes I've seen a picture of this drawing where in the middle you have like a circle, tiny circle that represents fat, right? Because we've got our protein, our carbohydrate, our fat, and then our vegetable. So that is just one way of thinking about, how to incorporate nutrition into your everyday meals. And of course, not every meal is going to look perfect like that. Like if you think about, having pizza actually incorporates a lot of different food groups, right? It incorporates the carbs from the crust. The cheese has a little bit of protein. Maybe you have some meat on your pizza, which adds protein. Maybe you have some veggies on your pizza, which of course incorporates vegetables. You've got a little bit of fat coming from the cheese. So you can break down, the foods that you're eating and start to recognize what food groups am I incorporating in this meal, okay? So that wraps up our topic for today. I'm going to include a few links for you guys. So again, I want to let you know that this is my last show with you all on the Be the Change page, but you can, of course, follow me on Instagram or YouTube. I also have a Facebook, but I am typically more active on Instagram and YouTube. So all of my past shows are up on my YouTube channel. So if you want to know more about incorporating intuitive eating, be sure to check out my YouTube because it has all of my past shows where I talk about honoring your hunger, respecting your fullness, challenging your food rules, making peace with food, body image, which was our last week's episode, which was really good. Be sure to check that out. So I just popped the links into the comments for you guys now, my YouTube channel and my Instagram. So be sure to check that out. But thank you all so much for tuning in. I really enjoyed having this show with you all. And I hope to hear from you. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me. But I will hope to see you soon. Take care.